Can you imagine waking up in a world where every sound could mean death? Where the snap of a twig, the rustle of grass, or the ripple of water might be the last thing you ever hear? What if your entire survival depended not on technology, but on fire, stone, and the strength of your tribe? This was the daily reality for Homo erectus nearly 1.7 million years ago. Stronger and taller than earlier hominins, they were among the first humans to walk long distances, to master fire, and to live not just as scavengers but as hunters. But they were far from safe. They lived in a world where predators ruled, storms raged without warning, and hunger was an endless shadow. And yet, against all odds, they survived, and in their survival lay the first great steps toward becoming truly human. The day begins in the faint chill before sunrise. A woman crouches low, blowing softly into a bowl of bark and clay. Smoke curls upward as embers glow. At last, flames spark, licking dry grass until a crackling fire pushes back the darkness. Around her, the band stirs. Infants cling to mothers' hides, older children rub sleep from their eyes, and hunters stretch their sinewed arms. Fire is everything. Without it, the night belongs to predators. With it, they have warmth, roasted food, protection, and a center for memory and teaching. Yet, fire is fragile. If the embers die, survival falters. They must carry it from place to place, feeding it carefully, guarding it as though it were a child. The band numbers just under 20. Men, women, children, and one elder whose hair is streaked with gray but whose hands still shape stone better than any other. They live together as one, because in this world, isolation is death. As dawn breaks, women sling infants across their chests, securing them with rough hides stitched with sinew. They prepare digging sticks and set out to gather roots, tubers, and berries. Their eyes scan the ground not only for food, but for tracks. The smell of lion scat, the imprint of hyena paws, these are warnings written in the earth. The hunters grip their weapons. Long wooden spears, fire-hardened at the tips, rest in calloused hands. At their waists hang stone hand axes, chipped carefully for cutting and scraping. Their lean, muscular bodies are not built for speed but for endurance. They can run for hours, sweating to cool themselves while prey overheats. This is persistence hunting, one of the earliest strategies that made humans different from predators. The hunters find fresh tracks, antelope moving toward a distant waterhole. They begin to jog, a steady pace across the golden grasses of the savanna. The sun rises, the heat builds, but their rhythm never breaks. Mile after mile they follow, tracking not only with sight but with memory, noticing disturbed grass, broken twigs, the faint smell of dung. Back at camp, the women and children gather. Digging sticks pry roots from the earth. Stones crack nuts. Children mimic the motions, playing but learning, their small fingers gripping tools. Even in laughter, survival lessons are passed forward. Hours into the hunt, the antelope herd falters. Foam drips from their mouths, muscles shudder with exhaustion. The hunters press closer. One animal stumbles, its body heaving. Spears arc through the air. Sharp tips sink into flesh. The beast collapses, blood steaming in the heat. The hunters roar, guttural cries that echo across the plain. They cut quickly, carving strips of meat, cracking bones for marrow, eating raw liver for strength. The rest they haul back, heavy but precious. The camp waits, hungry. But here is something most people don't realize. Homo erectus were not kings of their world. They were prey as often as predator. Lions stalked them, hyenas laughed at their heels, crocodiles lurked in every river. Even giant eagles could snatch small children from the ground. What if, for every successful hunt, you lived with the knowledge that you could become someone else's meal before the day ended? When the hunters return, the camp comes alive. Women call out, children run forward, the fire is stoked higher. Strips of antelope are laid across the flames. Fat drips, sizzling, smoke curling upward. The smell of roasted meat fills the air. Children gnaw small bones, their eyes wide with delight. The elder cracks open a marrow bone and scoops the rich center with a flake of stone. He hands it to a young boy, who devours it hungrily. This is more than a meal. This is nutrition that fuels growth, growth that fuels survival. And yet, around the fire, something more stirs. Hunters mimic the chase, thrusting spears, miming the fall of the antelope. Children watch, eyes bright, learning not through words, but through action. Shadows dance on the rocks, cast by firelight. Perhaps here lies the first spark of storytelling. What if this moment, sharing food, retelling the hunt, was the birth of human culture itself? But the savanna is never safe. As dusk falls, the fire crackles, but beyond its glow, the night awakens. Hyenas gather first, their laughter rising from the dark. Lions follow, their golden eyes glinting in the firelight. The band draws closer together. Spears lift. Firebrands glow, embers scattering as they wave them at the shadows. The predators creep closer, testing the edge of firelight. A hyena darts in, teeth snapping. A spear thrust drives it back. Sparks rise like stars into the night. The tension builds. The fire becomes the only line between survival and death. What if one ember went out, one flame was lost? Would the camp survive until dawn? Suddenly, a lioness lunges. She breaks through the dark, a golden blur. A hunter shouts, thrusting his spear. The weapon strikes deep into her flank, blood spraying. She roars, claws raking across his arm, dragging him down. The band erupts into chaos. Women scream, shielding children. Another hunter swings a firebrand, sparks exploding across the night. The lioness snarls, staggering back into the grass, wounded but alive. The fire is stoked furiously, flames roaring higher. The predators retreat, circling, waiting, unwilling to risk another attack. The wounded hunter moans, blood seeping from his arm. The elder chews herbs, pressing them into the wound. The camp breathes again, but only just. This was the life of Homo erectus. Every day was survival. Every night was defense. They lived in groups rarely larger than 20, moving constantly with the seasons, carrying fire in bark bundles, always searching for food, always avoiding predators. Yet, despite this, they achieved something astonishing. They crafted symmetrical hand axes, planned hunts, and carried fire from camp to camp. They began to expand beyond Africa, reaching Asia and Europe. They were the first true travelers, the first explorers, the first humans to step beyond the cradle. And all of this began with daily survival. Moments like this, when fire kept lions at bay, when mothers shielded children, when hunters risked their lives to defend their band. By dawn, the savanna is quiet again. Smoke rises from the fire, curling into the golden morning sky. The hunters, wounded but alive, rest against the rocks. Mothers soothe children who finally sleep. The elder sharpens a hand axe, his eyes never leaving the horizon. They have survived another day. But survival is never permanent. It must be won again, every sunrise, every nightfall, every step across the grasslands. This was life 1.7 million years ago. Brutal, dangerous, yet filled with triumph. Every ember kept alive, every predator held back, every child carried forward was another step on the path to humanity. So, what if you had been born into this world? Could you have endured the endless hunt, the lion's charge, the fragile fire? Or would the night have claimed you, as it did so many before? For Homo erectus, there was no choice. To survive was to endure. And in their endurance, the story of humanity was born. The fire smoldered low as dawn crept across the savanna, its pale light scattering the shadows of the predators who had haunted the night. The wounded hunter groaned, his arm shredded by the lioness's claws. Two women crouched beside him, chewing bitter herbs and spitting the pulp onto the wound, binding it with strips of hide. Infection was a constant killer. Without these plants, without this knowledge passed down from elder to youth, his survival would be uncertain. The camp moved slowly that morning. Mothers soothed children who had cried themselves to sleep. Hunters sharpened spears dulled by the fight. The elder squatted in silence, striking flakes from stone, his face grave. His tools were sharper than any tooth, and today they might be needed again. By midday, the band needed water. Hunger had been eased by the antelope meat, but thirst burned hotter with every step. The fire was lifted once more, glowing embers carried carefully in bark and clay. Ahead lay a narrow river, swollen by rain, its surface gleaming brown under the sun. The hunters tensed. Crocodiles ruled these waters, ancient predators who struck without warning. They stepped cautiously into the shallows, spears probing, eyes scanning every ripple. The mothers held children high against their chests, the fire carrier lifting the embers above his head. Then the surface broke. A crocodile surged, jaws gaping, water exploding. Spears thrust downward, shouts echoed. The beast snapped, teeth glinting before retreating into the depths. Heartbeats thundered. The band pressed on, step by step, until they climbed dripping onto the far bank. The fire still glowed. The children still breathed. Survival continued. As the sun dipped low, they found shelter beneath a rocky overhang. Fire crackled, smoke curling against the stone. Meat roasted, fat sizzling. The wounded hunter dozed, fever bright on his brow. Children laughed nervously as shadows danced, their small hands mimicking spears and firebrands. Around the flames, hunters reenacted the day's trials, spears thrusting into invisible lions, jaws snapping in pantomime. It was not just performance, it was teaching. In these flickering moments, memory became lesson, lesson became culture. What if these were the first sparks of human imagination? The first time fear was turned into story, and story into survival? The night stretched on. Hyenas laughed in the distance, their eyes glinting from the grass, but they did not dare to breach the wall of fire. The elder placed new fuel on the flames, his eyes reflecting both exhaustion and determination. Fire was more than warmth. It was the heartbeat of the tribe. Children curled against their mothers, soothed by the rhythm of crackling wood. The hunters sat awake in turns, spears across their laps, ears straining for danger. Every sound carried weight, the hiss of wind, the grunt of a lion far off, the splash of something moving in the river. For Homo Erectus, sleep was never complete, safety never guaranteed. But they endured. With every sunrise, they rose again. With every hunt, they pressed forward. With every fire carried across land and water, they pushed humanity's story further than it had ever gone. Life, 1.7 million years ago, was never easy. It was brutal, fragile, and short. Yet in the endurance of Homo erectus lay the foundation of us all. Their persistence was our inheritance. Their courage was our beginning. So ask yourself, what if you had lived then? Would you have stood firm with a spear as lions lunged from the dark? Would you have carried fire across a river teeming with crocodiles? Or would the night, as it did for so many, have swallowed you whole? For Homo erectus, there was no choice. They survived not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. And in their survival, the first chapters of humanity were written in blood, fire, and stone.